think one of the reasons why we must talk about climate justice is, let's begin with climate injustice. And you've got to make the link between injustice and greed. You go to the Old Testament, you go to Genesis, and you ask what went wrong. Why is the world as it is? Why is injustice, and for that matter, why is greed so systemic? I speak about how the world is run by political economies grounded in greed. And actually, for us believers, for us who take seriously the biblical narrative, it shouldn't surprise us because it's there in the Genesis account. When Moses has this engagement with God about what went wrong, it's very clear. It's humanity, humankind went beyond the boundaries, ate beyond the limits. That's what greed is about. And the tragedy with our world today, greed is so systemic, is so ingrained in the global economies, it's bred inequalities, and it's also bred the abuse of the environment, the abuse of nature. So if we speak about climate justice, we're talking about the need to restore harmony in creation. That is to say, those who eat too much, and we're speaking about those who don't pray for daily bread. We're talking about those who are not even satisfied with daily bread. They want more and more and more. That is the reason why we have the kind of crisis we are faced with, the climate unbelievable changes, the floods, and you know who they affect? They affect the poorest of the poor. They affect those who are not taking the most out of the world. So if the greedy change their lifestyles, that is to say, multinationals, countries that claim to be economically prosperous, if they change their consumption, if they change their lifestyles, change their economies to generosity, a way in which the world is thought about the earth as a piece of the earth in which we all have space, I can tell you we will begin to see climate justice, in which floods are no more, in which the poor have access to adequate health care. In other words, the poor don't have to scrounge and burn forests because of wood and so on and so forth, because there is a way in which we all have adequate energy. So these issues are really issues that have to do with the injustice that is systemic because of greed, and therefore to restore it, this is the good news of God. God cares about His world, His creation. Those of us who say we believe must show the same care. In other words, we must work for climate justice. Thank you.
Climate change is a reality for the indigenous people in Africa. And it is a prominent environmental and developmental issue and is the challenge of our time. It exacerbates insecurities of the most vulnerable populations, which includes women. One of the greatest challenges is water scarcity. 46% of rural population does not have access to safe drinking water. It is common for people, especially women, to walk long distances to fetch drinking water, and in some instances, they share water sources with livestock. From a personal experience, we used to come from school around 4 p.m., grab something small to eat, and sometimes you'd be eating as you go along to fetch the water, and trek for 3 kilometers with a 20-liter container. And it was not like you would get at the water source and collect the water and come back. You still had to go there and queue because we buried a 20-liter tin in the ground and the water would seep through. So you would have to queue and wait for your turn to come. And by the time you come back from the river, it would be well after 6 p.m. I remember one time my grandmother had to go looking for me because she was now worried what was wrong. And at times you would trek all the way, and just before you get water, you'd sleep and the water would fall. And you can imagine the pain that goes with that. From the story just told, apart from health risks, women lose a lot of time walking to water sources instead of participating in gainful economic activities. And of course, like I've said, that you would come back maybe well after 6. By that time, you come to cook. And for girls like myself, you would find that now there would be very little time to study. Because by the time you finish cooking and eating supper and washing dishes, you are already tired. So in the dry season also, the rivers are dry and they have to dig in the sand to get to the water. Food insecurity across SADC countries is an issue due to persistent droughts, back-to-back cyclones, and flooding. Rain-fed crops suffer most. I remember also one time with my mother, we had to trek for about 20 kilometers to go and look for maize to come back and mill. We found the maize, and coming back we had to carry a bag of 20 kilograms so that I would wake up in the morning to go and grind at the millers to at least have breakfast in the morning before going to school. So imagine for me and my mother, that was a 30 to 40 kilometer walk all round. Imagine waking up in the morning still tired to go to the millers, which were something like 2 kilometers away, to make sure that there is food at home to eat. Again, it is often the girls who have to drop out of school to work to help feed their families. The African Development Bank reports that women are heavily reliant on environmental related livelihoods, but the frequent droughts have had devastating impact on them while their men are out looking for jobs. Women and girls during times of drought are usually the last to eat and first to skip meals. Sometimes they can skip meals between 1 to 2 days in order to make sure their children eat. This also is a reality that I have lived through myself. One time we came back from school and my mother just said, "Today there is no food. I'm tired. I can't be walking all around looking for food." We thought she was joking, and she wasn't. And for the first time in my life, I slept without any food in my stomach. The following day, she woke up, she went, looked for maize and brought it home, and we were able to take it to the millers and then have a meal. Climate change has seen a lot of river flow reduced, some up to 40%. To quote grandmother Josephine Mandamin, she says, "Water is life and women are life givers." And so it is a traditionally recognized responsibility for women to take care of that which is necessary for life. Women carry water, indicating that women are caretakers of water and carry life within themselves. Imagine all of us, we came from our mother's wombs and we were in water for the 9 months that duration that were in our mother's wombs. The water of Mother Earth carries life to us then. And as women, we carry life through our bodies. Therefore, we as women are life givers and protectors of water. And that is why it is important to us that Mother Earth is given the respect that she deserves. Colonialism processes, patriarchal and missionary colonialism, Western education and capitalist economy resulted in men being literate and finding white-collar jobs quicker than women, forcing the women to remain in the rural areas, providing households with water and fuel wood for heating and cooking. As the ones affected by the water crisis, the women are raising their voices to draw attention to mechanisms applied to re-empower and support indigenous women in their role as water stewards, and to be part of or lead the water governance dialogue to overcome these challenges. A woman in Kenya refers herself to a farmer, seed custodian, and memory retriever in her community in Tharaka County, Central Kenya. She has been working to recover the memory of indigenous seeds and has been working to find elderly women in interior villages to recover varieties of sorghum, millet, and cowpeas. These crops are indigenous to Africa, but their consumption has declined. Need for cash to pay taxes and school fees forced the adoption of foreign crops such as maize and others. And Christian beliefs resulted on the reduction of production of crops such as millet because they were used in indigenous rituals. Globalization and urbanization has caused a shift from indigenous food, and governments have encouraged the production of rice, wheat, maize, which are prone to global price volatility, and forces of the climate crisis leaving indigenous women poorer. These combined factors weaken the resilience of indigenous people to respond to climate change, creating an ecological and cultural crisis. Residents near River Katita in Tharaka have experienced consecutive years of little rain, difficulties accessing water, forced to grow hybrid seeds using fertilizers, and this have left them poorer because when you do not use the fertilizer, then your yields will not be as good as when you use the fertilizers. Whenever the indigenous women met, they brought indigenous seeds resistant to weather conditions to share as gifts. Seed are the exclusive province of women among the Tharaka. Women select seeds before harvesting, classify them according to desired characteristics, and provide seeds for rituals. So, restoring women's knowledge and practices will mean less dependence on hybrid seeds that cannot be used in indigenous ceremonies, and seeds which require one to purchase seeds each season and are not resistant to climate change. This climate crisis that is preying on people's poverty and worsening levels of inequality and resulting in rising malnutrition rates should be dealt with to free the women and children who are always hit first, says Nyagwa. I thank you.
I will remember nostalgically my much younger days in my rural village, when the levels of nutrition, in my view, was a lot better on average than it is today. People could walk to the lake and buy fish, so they took care of their protein in those days. People could till their kitchen gardens, and in many ways they could satisfy their domestic needs. People could till their land without the use of fertilizer, And in many ways, they could get yields that would satisfy them and something to take to the market to cater for their other needs. But on average today, if you visit many rural African villages, whether those villages are in Eritrea or in Tanzania or in Kenya or in Chad or the Democratic Republic of Congo, there is a sense in which we have become prisoners of a new way of doing things. Every evening, little children are dispatched to the nearest shopping center to buy highly sifted maize meals. And that is what they make do, making an all-starch meal. Begging the question once again, why is it that so many years after the attainment of political independence, why is it that after so many years with universities that we have created in almost all countries dedicated to agriculture, we have not been able to conquer this problem of greening Africa and making Africa self-sufficient in the area of production of food, and specifically grain. I oftentimes, in my more unguarded and uncharitable moments, indict Africa that why is it that 50 years after independence on average, without being an opponent of globalization, why is it that it's still Monsanto and Syngenta that must produce maize seed for us? Why is it that over so many years, while being alive to the presence of Kenya Seed and Seedco, why is it that this has not been replicated in different parts of Africa? Why must we still swear by Monsanto and Syngenta as the standard gold in that area? Why is it that those of you who have had the advantage of exposure to innovation in the area of agriculture, why is it that your intervention has not made dramatic changes? And one is not simply saying that nothing has been done. One is asking the uncomfortable question, why Africa continues to punch below her weight in the area of agriculture, if we are to be specific. Why is it, one asks, that Africa does not produce enough wheat to feed her people, while our people love bread? Why is it that Africa does not produce enough sugar cane to satisfy her needs? Why is it that Africa does not produce enough maize, enough sorghum, enough millet, enough barley, enough of everything to be a continent that can sit at the dinner table of human civilization and say unequivocally, we are capable of feeding ourselves? Nigeria relies on oil. 80% of its income is from oil production. It suffers from what commentators describe as the Dutch disease. Nigeria is incapable of producing enough rice for her people, but they love jollof rice. They are incapable of producing enough chili, and they love their chili. They are incapable of producing enough tomatoes, and they love their tomatoes. They are incapable of doing things, not because they do not have the ability, but a conscious decision has been made by people at critical positions to concentrate on oil as the milk cow for Nigeria. So going forward, what one must ask, particularly an organization such as AGRA and NEPAD and the African Union, what real interventions must be made in Nigeria? Because Nigeria is a true potential giant in that regard. If Nigeria were to wake up from her slumber, then the entire West African region would wake up from her slumber. Because one has analyzed Nigeria and the plight of Nigeria and our inability as we speak now to produce enough food for ourselves, one need not analyze Mali. One need not analyze Senegal. One need not analyze the little Benin and the little Togo and the little Gabon and the little Cameroon, because the story is the same in that part of the world. Those of you who have gone to that part of the world, getting milk in the shelves of the stores in those countries is as difficult as getting snow in hell. So there is a sense in which we must ask ourselves the critical question: why is it that those interventions don't make us realize our potential? One sometimes, as one looks to the future and one looks at Congo, a country that is as big as the entire Western Europe, and yet Congo, with a population of no more than 80 million, yet Congo, whose perhaps 90% of our land is arable, one asks the question, if that land were to be utilized productively, that land could feed the entire Africa. In fact, I remember now it being said of Congo that it is capable of doing three things which could liberate Africa. That Congo is capable of generating enough hydroelectric power to cover the entire Africa. That Congo has waters in her rivers that could irrigate the entire Sahara Desert. Of course, some of it is exaggerated, but is exaggerated deliberately to demonstrate to us the levels of underutilization of that potential. That the Congolese soil is capable of producing enough food for the entire Africa. One asks the question, what must one do in order to unlock the potential of the Democratic Republic of Congo? One asks the same question of Angola. If Angola were to use her land effectively and liberate herself from the chains of dependency on oil, what could Angola achieve?
So we've got to say that Europeans didn't introduce God to us. No, they didn't. I always say it's a misnomer. It's a falsification of the truth for even Europeans to say they brought Jesus to Africa. No, Jesus is too big for anybody to carry. It's Jesus who brings them to Africa. It's God. God is Imana, Katonda, Luhanga, Now so we all, the reality God cannot be imported or exported. No, he is the creator of the heavens and the earth, present. The reality of Jesus Christ cannot be imported or exported. Yeah. So I think that's the challenge. The challenge is for us, especially who lead, not to continue to promote a way of being a Jesus person that's foreign to the authentically Ugandan, African, but also be open to the joy and the experience of cultural infusion, cultural conversation, and yeah.
Thank you.
One important thing I want to highlight here is how the African worldview sees humanity in a relationship to the entire created order. Unlike in the West, the African worldview has repeatedly pointed to the interconnectedness of humanity to the world of nature. Humans are part of nature. They don't just live in the natural environment, they are part of the very natural environment. But beyond that, in the African worldview, we have come to realize that our existence as human beings is somehow linked to the existence of the entire universe. And there are many ways Africans have tried to do that, from names to totems, from region to some of the rituals that are practiced across the continent of Africa. Now, I want to start by just allowing us to see how the African worldview can help reform our thinking, because until our thinking is reformed, this crisis will continue to haunt us. The most important thing which we need to realize is what Africans realized centuries ago, that we live on this earth, but it does not belong to us. It belongs to the ancestors, who are generally called the guardians of the land. So it is entrusted to us to use it for the benefit of future generations, implying that the moral question of the ongoing environmental degradation is not just about ourselves, about our survival, but we should be thinking about generations to come. Our ancestors gave us this land, and we have the duty, the moral obligation to give it back to the future generation. In this case, then, you and me do not possess this earth or the natural goods. Yes, we may cheat and lie to ourselves that we have title to the land and the natural goods, but in reality, that title is nothing. The most important title is that which is held by the world of ancestors, those who lived before us. And we have the duty to deliver that title to future generations. We live on this earth, but it is not ours. Now, in Christianity, that is made very clear in biblical literature, that the earth does not necessarily belong to us. It belongs to the Creator. And if we want to speak in Christian terms, that is, if we leave aside the Hebrew Bible and go to the Christian Bible, this very question takes on a different note. John, among the Gospels, begins by relating the history of creation based on the person of Jesus Christ. Now, if there's a topic that has fully been addressed by many African scholars, it is the question of the relationship of Jesus Christ to the world of our ancestors. This relationship makes Jesus Christ as our ancestor. And in this regard, Jesus Christ should be understood as an ecological ancestor. Now, this moves Jesus Christ from being the ancestors of humanity alone to becoming the ancestor of all creation, which in fact is fundamental to the New Testament teaching, is the origin of all that is, implying that just as humanity can be said to be sacred, so is the entire created order. They are equally sacred. And if earth is sacred, if we learn to see earth as sacred, we will realize that wherever we step, or when we touch a tree, when we see the waterfalls, therein is the divine. They represent the divine nature of Christ. For without Jesus Christ, nothing was made. In this regard, understanding Jesus as our ancestor, and more so understanding Jesus Christ as our ecological ancestor, puts a lot of responsibilities on us to take care of this earth, to make the fight for integrity of creation a sacred fight. And in terms of mission, it can be said to be a missiological task. Earth-keeping is just as sacred as preaching the gospel to a sinner. Again, this puts a lot of responsibilities on us as Christians to see a tree like St. Francis would have done it. There are other people, in fact, the people I studied and I documented and wrote about in my book, God's Family, God's Earth. The people of Simamba, the Tonga tribe in Zambia, they claim their authority to be based on a frog. And others who claim their authority or their heritage to be based on earth, the deity of the earth. Others will see themselves as dogs. Some will see themselves as birds. Indirectly telling us that our existence is planted in the natural world. We did not make ourselves. We are products of the natural world. Now, when I see a rat, I see my father. When I see a mountain, I see a father or sister or brother. That philosophy, which unfortunately was lost between the time of St. Francis and our time, can it be revisited? The question of totems is not about culture anymore. It is about who we are. It's a reminder to us that yes, I am a human being, but deep in me is my relationship to the natural world. And if we can learn to treat the natural world like our friends in the West tend to treat their pets, tend to shed tears when their pet dies, we will have a better world, friends, than we have now. And to add to that, we will see, like Moses in the wilderness, that the burning bush is sacred. The snake is sacred. Our trees are sacred. In fact, among Africans, many rituals are conducted under specific trees, implying that our existence and that of the natural world of trees are interlinked. Yes, we exist as humans by relating with other humans. In fact, we exist in a web of relationship. That web is of critical importance, friends, because it allows us to view each other as sacred beings. But that philosophy, I think, has been misunderstood, because my humanity is not enough in itself. My humanity is linked to non-humans. So a person with Ubuntu takes care of the natural world, treats dogs with dignity, looks at other beings not just as things to be exploited, in fact, Yes, we can kill a rat, but the way of killing that rat will be judged. If I set a rat on fire, people will condemn it, because that is not what a human being should act like. And that is at the heart of our problem today. We have distanced ourselves from the world of nature. But unless the world wakes up today and see the divine in the natural world, unless the world come to terms with the fact that we do not own this earth, and as COVID-19 has shown us, if we don't wake up to the challenges of environmental degradation, climate change, we are in fact killing ourselves. But maybe you can say we are not killing just ourselves. We are killing future generations. And as an environmental theologian, as well as a human rights defender, I invite you not just to see a poor person as an image of God, but like Moses, to look at that bush as sacred.
I started doing activism in the first week of January 2019 after seeing and researching about how climate change was affecting the people in my country. I went on to understand how it specifically affects the African continent, and I realized that the climate crisis was the greatest threat facing humanity. Africa is the lowest emitter of CO2 emissions of all continents, but it is among the most affected by the climate crisis. Climate change greatly affects the water resources, food security, infrastructure, ecosystems, and the people. We have seen devastating impacts of climate change in Africa, for example, the droughts and the floods. With the increasing global temperatures, the weather patterns are being disrupted, causing shorter and heavier rainy seasons and longer and hotter dry seasons. The heavy rainfall has led to floods in different parts of the continent, leading to much devastation and destruction of people's livelihoods. Many people have lost their lives, while many have lost their homes, farms, and businesses. Cyclone Idai was one of the worst cyclones to affect the African continent, leaving a lot of damage in Mozambique, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. The heavy rainfall and strong winds left more than 1,300 people dead, and many more were recorded as missing. Everything was reduced to rubble. All that was left was an economic crisis. The current crisis is not something that is coming in the future. You must treat this as a crisis. Leaders must realize that the climate change issue is an urgent issue. It is a serious issue, and now is the time for them to face the climate emergency. We are in the anthropogenic age, and we are going to see disaster after disaster, challenge after challenge, suffering after suffering, extinction of species, destruction of ecosystems and communities if nothing is done about this. You must be asking yourself how we are going to survive this and build a better future for the world. First of all, leaders must acknowledge that we are in a crisis and start treating it as a crisis. The people and the planet must come first before anything else. If you do not treat climate change as a crisis, then you will not do what is necessary for us to get out of this mess. It is time for leaders to leave their comfort zones and see the danger that we are in and do something about it. This is a matter of life and death. We are showing you the direction. There are two choices we present to you today: life and death. Choose life for the people. Choose life for the ecosystems. Choose life for the planet. Be part of the change. Be part of the transformation. Use your voice. Use your platform. Use your resources. Use your position. Do not be silent at a time like this. This fight needs everyone. If we are united, if we work together, if we demand for climate justice, we will be able to transform the world and make it a better place. Thank you.